Welcome back to the Raptors 905 podcast. I'm Savanna Hamilton. Of course, we got Charles Kissy. Charles, we're joined by a friend today. Who is it?
Yes, Amy Audibert. For those that don't know Amy, and everyone should by now, commentator, analyst, coach, you name it. She is basketball personified. And I'm so excited to have her on and to have the rest of you really get to know her.
Absolutely. She's been a mentor to myself, having worked with her directly on the Raptors 905 broadcast this past year. And she's also just an awesome human being. After every single broadcast, she could have just drove right back home, but instead she decided to drop me off back at my place, which is the heart of downtown Toronto in the middle of February, which you can imagine was very snowy. So this is the type of person that Amy is, and I cannot wait to dive into her story as well. So let's welcome her on. Joining us on the podcast now is Amy Audibert. Amy, how are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you guys. I need some 905 in my life every once in a while. So
absolutely. Oh my gosh, we're going to get to all of that in a second. But how was your trip? Because I saw you just a couple weeks ago, I guess now when the podcast is going to be released. But I saw you last week recording here in Toronto with me. And now you are where?
Right now I'm in Texas. I'm excited. I'm going to be in Vegas for the summer league soon. And yeah, life is good, right? It's nice that there's some normalcy again, just being able to take care of the things that we need to with our feet on the ground as opposed to everything over a Zoom. So that's been nice.
You're telling me here we are over Zoom, but maybe sometime we could also catch up in person again with the whole 905 Title League gang.
Amy, was it weird getting on a plane for the first time in over a year? What's that like? I did it the other day. It was strange for me.
Yeah, right. I've been traveling a little bit with some other summer work that I'm doing, the CBL League, as you know, which has been awesome. But this was the first international flight. And yeah, so I never fly out of Pearson internationally. I think I went to Cuba when I was in grade 10. Like, that's it. So just like the whole like customs in the airport, but obviously like you don't have an option to show up at the airport unprepared right now. Like pre-send in your test results, you have to pre-send in like all your papers and documents. So yeah, it was super smooth. But it wasn't. Yeah, I guess it's kind of like a bike, right? Like we spend so much time traveling and flying and stuff, so it was kind of nice. Like I'm not gonna lie, like a 3-hour flight. Let's go.
I kind of felt the same way, because although it was nice to be home for over a year, you kind of miss it at some point, right? Like you're so used to being, having a bag packed at the door type thing that you kind of miss it a little bit. But anyway, welcome back to traveling and flying.
Thanks, you too.
I think we got
safely traveling and flying.
That's
safely.
Right.
Major. I think we got to talk about why Amy's traveling and flying. That's because she's kind of a big deal, Yeah, I'm going to hype you up, Amy. This is going to just get used to it right now. That's what the whole podcast is about. It's about me making fun of Charles Kissy and hyping our guests up all the time. But no, you're a big deal, Amy, honestly, because, you've done WNBA commentary, believe it, for the Atlanta Dream, right? And then you come back up and you're so versatile. You come and you do the G League for the Raptors 905. Commentary as well, and you killed it. Like I always say Amy's like the best broadcast member on the team. I don't even care. Like I'm sideline reporting and Akil and Randy, they're doing their thing as play-by-play, but like here's Amy just absolutely killing it. So we're excited to pick your story apart and talk about it.
Thanks. But it's just I'm not the best Sav. I just probably been doing it the longest, which means I'm the oldest. So easy.
Either way, you get that MVP presence. So always leading the way.
So people may or may not know that you played basketball at the University of Miami, but take us through basketball. Where did the love of the game come from?
Yeah, and I think people do know when I get in front of them, right? Because I'm giant. So I either get always volleyball or basketball, and usually people are like, "Did you play volleyball?" And I'm like, "No." Those are my friends, but I did not play volleyball. Like I stumbled into a gym by accident when I was 10 years old. My older sister was signing up for a house league in Niagara Falls. It was the first year of house league, and they just needed to fill out the roster. So that was it. And I swear and I joke, and it's totally true. So my sister and I we were on the worst team, and I think we contributed to it being the worst team. But the conveners halfway through the league, like the season, took the two worst players on the worst team, me and my sister, and put us on the best team, and took the two best players on the best team and put them on the worst team. So we ended up winning a championship my first year, and really thought that we had something to do with it. And as you both know, when you're successful, right, it's in some ways more motivating than when you're not successful, right? To like feel that. So maybe the conveners of the Niagara Falls minor basketball house league kind of like sparked the fire for me. I've just been fortunate. I always say like I've been super fortunate because when I was younger, I was not very good. I was just big and I had good hands. And I was lucky because I ran into a lot of coaches that kept me on competitive teams because they saw potential. And it's definitely something that I think about often for me too, right? Just the potential of maybe being good. And I've been fortunate just to be in really good gyms, play for really good coaches, and haven't looked back.
Well, that potential was realized because you got a scholarship to Miami, which is one of the best universities you can go to for basketball D1. Like it's a great school, on top of just a great location for a school. I don't know how much studying you were able to do, but I know if I went there, I wouldn't be.
Honestly, I was like using tanning beds my freshman year because it was embarrassing when I came home and I was like paler than all my friends because people were like, there's no way you live in Miami. And I was like, they don't have sun in gyms. Like people don't realize that's all you do, right? It's like sit in a gym in class. But anyways, I'm not going to lie. Like obviously I had some fun too.
Absolutely. So when do you think was a turning point where you kind of started to believe in yourself and like in the game? Like it's one thing to have coaches believe in you, but then another thing to start to like, like maybe I am good.
For me, honestly, when I really started getting serious about basketball, this could sound funny, I started competitively weightlifting. Like I started Olympic weightlifting with Jason McLean and Charles, you might know him because he's
I know Jay,
yeah. And I was stronger than everybody. Like, and that became my game. And honestly, again, like, I think that's when I just fell in love with the game so much because I was different. But it was something I was putting all this work into. And then I started running like 110s in the dark, outside on my road because I had to get in better shape. And like, that's when I fell in love with something because I was pushing so hard and I loved being out on the court and I loved diving in. I was like a footwork back to the basket post player. And like, I really fell in love with it in high school when I started doing all those extra things. I don't know if I guess it was almost an obsession at some point. But I've said this before, and it turns into your life. But it's not just like you don't just show up and play your game. Like your social circles, all your friends, 15 years later, it's still my life. It's just in a different capacity.
So the transition, though, so you graduate, and what's sort of next for you? How did you know? I mean, did you know you'd end up here? Did you know you'd be doing WNBA games and going to summer league and working with pro sports? Was that the plan, or like many of us, did it just happen that way?
Yeah, definitely not the plan. I had to stop playing basketball because I had 3 herniated discs in my back, and I played all through college with them, and it was awful. So I could hardly walk my senior year. I'll never forget. We played Maryland, defending national champions, and I couldn't walk that morning. It was the first game I ever missed. And it was like devastating. We were going to get slammed, but I just wanted to hit them. You know what I mean? Like I just wanted to stand in my key in Coral Gables and hit them. So when my senior year was done, I had to take a year off because I could hardly walk. It was terrible. And then I got in really good shape again because I wanted to go overseas. So my coaches were probably so mad at me. I was probably in better shape a year later than I was my whole time because it was just different training and like that. I was doing it because I wanted to do it, not because someone was telling me to do it. And then I got back on the court. I was, like I said, best shape ever, felt so good. As soon as I started like banging and, hitting people, like I couldn't walk again. So I literally remember that day I had to say, I'm done as a player. And I took a year off. I took 2 years off. I was like, all of a sudden felt like I didn't like the game because I felt like the game betrayed me. I gave so much to it, and just to be over, like what?
Yep.
Yeah. So then I moved back home to Niagara Falls. My visa expired. all my friends were American. I wanted to make sure I could come see them again. I lived that kind of underground life for a year, and I had enough. So I came home, and Niagara College has a great BRTF program. And I hummed and hawed for a year. I bartended at the casino and became like best friends with my grandma. It was the best thing that happened because, she's like, I carry her with me forever now. And that wouldn't have happened if I didn't have that year with nothing going on. And yeah, so I said, if I don't go to Niagara College and try this, then I'm going to be really, really mad at myself. So I walked into Niagara College and was literally like, can I work on TV? Just tell me. I was like, I don't want to waste my time, and I don't want to waste my money. Do you think I can work on TV? And they were like, they probably looked at me like, who is this nut job? Like, I don't know. So they put me through halfway through the program because I had already had my master's. Huge mistake because I missed all the editing process. Like Savvy would cringe if you knew what I don't know, which is basically everything on the editing side. But I always say, like, I love sport. I love athletics more than I love television. So like, I don't want to go work in news, and I don't like, I want to be in gyms. I want to be around coaches and athletes, and like, that's my life. So as much as I probably should know more of the technical stuff, I'm learning as I'm going still.
You said like so much stuff that we can dive into there, but going back to like feeling like the game betrayed you, I feel like a lot of athletes, and I think this is important to talk about because I feel like a lot of athletes, especially in basketball, kind of feel like this sometimes. I remember I was hosting a panel for Canada basketball, and like some recently retired athletes were saying that like, they've had to kind of come to terms and like really process like their career, and a lot of it ended in injury, right? And it's almost like you gave so much to the game, and like sometimes it feels like the game hurts you as a result, like physically, but then also like, mentally or emotionally, just based on your experiences, because we all know that like playing any organized sport also has its politics at times. So
Politics in sport?
Oh. What? Yeah.
That's a
thing.
No. Politics in youth sport? You're threatening 16-year-olds? What? Huh? Like, come on now. Crazy.
Exactly. So like, I would love to hear you like dive into that more. Like, how did it feel to, like, when did the back pain start? When did the discs start to, I guess, get recognized as like your injury? And then also like, how did that make you feel mentally, and how did you like recover from that enough to go play pro?
Well, I didn't, but so I was actually crazy because when I was in high school, I had a stress fracture in my leg. So I remember what that felt like. So when I got to college, I went early. I actually started summer school in what should have been my high school graduation. I was homesick. Like the staff would like years later laughed at me because like I was like, don't talk to me. I was like a mess. I come from a big family, super tight. So anyways, I went through summer, had a great summer, did a ton of training, and then came back and then went back for my freshman season. And I started having this leg pain again. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have a stress fracture. And so I like did an MRI, nothing showed up, waited 6 weeks. And I was like in tears every night because I was like, this team thinks that I'm like saying, oh, my leg hurts, so I don't have to do like preseason training, which if college basketball preseason is like, you're just begging for practice to start. And then when practice starts, you're begging for it to be training. But anyway, but it was crazy. So then they did another MRI and there was no stress fracture. And I was like, oh my God, like, I'm like not scared to work hard. And I was like, these people, this is their first impression of me, and they think that I'm making this up. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's go practice. And they were like, well, we're going to do one more MRI. And they did an MRI on my back. And that's when they found like the discs were like pushing into nerves. It was a big thing. And I got like injections. I did everything and nothing really worked. So it was not fun. That's why like now I like don't take Tylenol. I actually like I shouldn't even say this. I like tore my quad and didn't feel it because I was on so much back medication for my back. Like I was pretty banged up by the end of it. And that was my game, right? Like I was like a smash the flash, like guard the 6'8". You don't score, but you don't let her score. And that like requires some like down and dirty work. So it was tough because like I said, I was the strongest. Like when I got there my freshman year, I was lifting with the seniors. Like I was elite strong and I couldn't lift weights for 4 years. like modified. Like I couldn't do the powerlifting. I had to do dumbbell work, which, like if you're like an athlete like me and you just got a little twitch different, right? Like you want to get in there and deadlift and power clean. So, yeah, like I felt like I was just getting by. I never really felt like my dominant self anymore, which was unfortunate. But
did the coaches understand okay? Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you did 4 years there, and I think a lot of coaches would have been like, see you later.
I remember this meeting, and it was crazy because like I had just turned 18 years old again, and I was like away from my family. I'll never forget the meeting where they were like, my coaches were like, Amy, we will honor your full scholarship. You can still be part of the team. You don't have to play because it was serious. Like my injury was I don't like to talk about it too much. My injury was so serious where the team doctor said if it was like a higher, like in my neck, they would pull the papers and disqualify me. But wow. I couldn't be there and not play. I do have a different switch, guys. Like I was like, no, I have to play. I can't sit here for 4 years and not be on the court. And I took it like a day at a time. Like I was fortunate that I was at a Power 5 school that did have a lot of, financial help and did have great doctors and did have like MRI that day. You know what I mean? So, I mean, obviously those things help too. But I never like once felt supported or felt like I had to do it. And then, like when you make the decision that you're going to play a season, you're not like thinking about not playing the season.
Would you do it again?
Oh gosh, yeah. 100%. I would do, are you kidding me? Like I would do it again. And I don't know what I could have done different, but I probably would have like, I don't know, maybe like done more medical stuff. I don't know.
So was these injuries found like kind of when you like got there, or did you think you had them back in high school too?
No, like totally no idea. Like I thought I had leg problems. I didn't even know what like discs were in your back. Like I had no idea. And I was like, also just felt bad because I felt bad for my staff because like, I wasn't lying. I didn't know, right? That's just like a terrible thing to like a month into someone's freshman year, right? We were like a top 25 team when I was like getting recruited. They had a lot of faith in me and what I could do. So I definitely felt like some sort of like accountability, right? That I had to do. And I think that's where like my leadership kind of really started like becoming a focus for me and vocal leadership, which is kind of like communication, which is also why I decided to try broadcast because I knew like I could still help and contribute, maybe not the physical ways that I wanted to all the time.
So talk about the broadcast. What was your first job? You graduate Niagara College, then what? What's the first gig and what's that first day like?
Yeah, so my first gig, I got hired as the color analyst for the Canisius College Griff. Which was sick because, it was weird because I went all through college. Like I want to be a sideline reporter. I always say Doris Burke was just starting to get her like MBA reps in an analyst chair. This was totally foreign. Like women just didn't, and I didn't have a big name. I didn't have a great playing career. Like I was still really like banged up about that mentally. So I was like, my only like in is going to be on the sideline. And if anyone knows me, I'm pretty direct and blunt about stuff. Like just yes or no. So I was like, okay, well, if my in's going to be on the sideline. And when I was in college, like I took like 90 mobile reps. Like I did not miss a single game on the sideline. All I did was sideline. They're like, can you do tricolor? I was like, no, I don't want to practice something I'm not going to get the chance to do. So yeah, well, Terry Zay, who at the time was the head coach of Canisius, I love Terry. He's like the best energy ever. They were like, hey, we're starting to broadcast our games. Do you want to like come call them? And I was like, okay, well, sure. Like I'll give it a go. And then like, you think you're so good at something, so bad at something. But yeah, so I ended up doing the Canisius College women. And then the following season, I did all their men and their women. And then that turned into the University at Buffalo because they had started the ESPN3 broadcast and they brought in all outside people, which for me, I tell them this, and that place will always mean like the foundation of my career because they brought in, like I was sitting beside like Buffalo Bills voices. And my producer, director, Matt Gold, he is now at the Olympics shooting Michelle Tafoya, doing the swimming last night. Like that's his camera. He's so talented. And I learned so much from those people by sitting there and doing the reps. It's why it's so hard, right? Because you don't get reps. And then I was always fortunate because I sat with people that were super cool and like honest. And willing to help. And like, I do feel like I was uplifted so much during those years because, again, like there's so much more than just showing up and talking when you're calling a game. It's an entire like spectrum. It's skill set. So I learned a lot during those years.
And I'm guessing that happened, that followed directly after your Niagara College like school.
Yeah. And then that's how our industry works oftentimes. Like I get my job at Canisius, and the whole time I was also doing sideline reporting for Time Warner Cable Sports in New York. So I was covering like every sport because I wasn't completely sold on like that I have to do basketball. It was super important for me to be able to show that like I can cover different sports and have different skill sets. So my first sideline assignment was lacrosse, a college lacrosse game. And I was like, I don't know anything about lacrosse. And I feel like now it's like one of my, like, obviously not basketball, but second, third, fourth favorite sport because of that job. Like I had to invest so much into it and I learned so much about it. And those athletes are tremendous. But yeah, and it kind of just, every job kind of just always leads to somebody that maybe helps you get the next one.
So then what was the next one after Buffalo?
Well, that's when I started picking up like a lot of freelance gigs. My last season at Buffalo, I picked up a couple sideline gigs with the 905. Super cool when your friend, Coach Charles Kissy, is like one of your first interviews too, right? Funny because that was like the first like kind of in Canada. I had this resume where I was like building up in the States, but people in Canada didn't really know who I was. I mean, Dwayne Watson's awesome because he had me on the Hangout over the years. And so that was kind of like my little, like tiny little toe in the door, just to have some kind of contact up here. But then when I had the opportunity to fill in the sideline for the 905 for a couple games, that was important to me because again, just like getting in front of a camera in Canada is like really hard. Yeah, you guys know. And then right after that, I was fortunate and I picked up my WNBA job. And which the funny story about the WNBA job is when the season finished, the team was the team almost set the WNBA record for lowest field goal percentage of the season. It was like, and it was my first year. It was like covering a professional team that is not good is very challenging because you're working for the home broadcast, right? So, but anyways, learned a lot through that experience. And when the season was over, I was torn because I didn't know if I should come home. Atlanta's a great place to be for television, Turner, like there's NBA TV, there's a lot of like big networks down there. But I had some stuff going on at home and I knew that there was a little bit of, there might be an opening with the 905. I thought I had done a good job of like just trying to get my name in there. I made the decision that I needed to come home. So I was like driving home at 4:00 in the morning. I checked my email at 11:00 at night. Like I was closing my laptop to pack it in my bag. And there was the 905 offer. So like divine timing, it just like my drive home was like so much better. Like my music was very upbeat.
I bet, huh?
I definitely lost my voice within the first hour because I was like jamming, like, so like just sometimes like timing of stuff works out, right? Because I was going home like with a huge opportunity that I knew I was ready for.
And you talk about being ready. I mean, I've watched you work and I always think it's amazing. And even I didn't know how much work goes in to every game. Like I know from a coaching end, I know what the players do and you have an idea, but you said it earlier. Sometimes people think you just show up and talk. Right? Tell people how much work goes in to preparing for a game. And I know everyone's different, but you bust your butt. Talk about that.
Thanks. I guess part of it is like, I understand, like, I don't have respect from being a basketball player. So first of all, like, I better know everything.
But is that real or is that a chip? Like, because I know what you mean. Real. I know what you mean when you say that.
Real.
But
yeah.
Okay.
Because you think of like, and it's nothing, I understand why big names get jobs and people are going to be like, oh, cool, that's so-and-so talking, right? Like if Amy gets a big job, they're going to be like, who? Like, who's this chick? So I don't have a whole lot of time to show you.
Mind you, they'll still be like, oh, Google her real quick, University of Miami, cool, enough said right there. They don't go into the how many points per game did she score? Like, it's still, you still have enough of a title behind your name there.
Yeah, I feel like television is just like pretty cutthroat. I don't know. And sitting in the analyst chair too, right? Like when you're the analyst, you're the expert. Like, it's different. It's, to me, that's a different role. It's like you're supposed to have the expert opinion. I'm going to put this out there, and I don't say it offensively. Like, the G League is different. This is different breed because you don't know who's playing. You don't know what's going to happen until like sometimes like I'll spend like a good time on a player and like show up and he warms up. And then like if Stefano's listening in, he'll kind of come over like a couple minutes before tips and be like, oh, just so you know, so-and-so scratch. So like the whole, like what you think the game plan might be is like, that's why I've absolutely loved my job with the 905 because it's made me so much better. Just like preparing. But for me, it's always been really important. And I think this kind of sets me apart from maybe some other analysts is I try to dig into players as people. Like I really try to get a story for almost every guy. Like I want to know something about them. I want to know something about their hobby, their passion, their interest. Obviously, I love the basketball part. Like, let's not get it. Like, I love the X and O's, digging into the strengths and weaknesses of a player. Like, that's awesome. But then also, like, I feel like it's part of my job to also present them as a person because they are, at the end of the day, they're young men or young women. And that takes a lot of time, right? Like, it does. It takes a lot of extra time. It takes a lot of, and I know I've spent a lot of time over the years also building my network. So I know if a 905 guy played for a certain coach, like even if I don't know the coach, I'm confident that I know someone that knows the coach. So often it's just a quick phone call. Hey, what do you think of this person? What do you think of that person? When Henry Ellenson got signed by the 905, the first person I tried to get in touch with was Sarah Kustok, the Brooklyn Nets analyst, right? And she gave me some good stuff on him. That was through a friend. So that's part of it too, right? It's just like having your network to be able to build your package and your information. I'm going long-winded here, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of studying, film studying, building relationships, because obviously if a coach trusts you a little bit more, if players trust you, they can, and it's not like, you're going to like blab, oh, their goal in this game is to do this and this and this, but things that you can look for. And then let your producer or director know so they can get visual on that. Or if you see something cool, like you get in talk back and say to your producer, hey, can you get that on the deck? Like so much more than showing up and talking.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like you should see, having the pleasure to work with you directly in the 905 this past year, like the amount of papers you would show up with. And the fact that for our listeners as well, like Amy saves every single box score, right? She saves every single box score from every single game she's pretty much ever worked. And so if there's a...
You're making me sound like a little bit... I also had 500 cats at home. Like...
No, maybe not cats, but one big dog.
I do, yeah. And I do recycle. I will say that. I'm an avid recycler, like borderline obsession of recycling, because I go through a lot of paper. But I say I have a file for like every game I've covered, professional games.
But that comes in handy.
Yeah, well, especially like when you play a team like 2 or 3 times in a season, I just go grab the profiles from the players, because that's the other thing, like 90% of your work like does not make the air.
Yeah.
So I guess that you can also say that's like efficiency or time management. But yes, box scores are important to me also.
But I mean, that also means like, because if you keep a file of every single game, you have something to go back and reference. If a player now gets signed to an NBA team and we saw them, they might not even be on the 905. They might be on like, just Grand Rapids or whatever, right? Like they could be somewhere else, but then they get called up to another. You have context and reference from previous notes that you have. It's like an encyclopedia. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, like to me, it's like efficiency. Like it's just being able to go, because I know what like prepping a blind game looks like. It takes a lot of time, and especially in the season. Like this past season, we had like 18 games in 26 days. Like like I would like, if I can like go ahead and recycle some stuff that didn't make my air. Like yes, I would like to do that.
Absolutely.
And talk about the grind of your industry. Like you're going to summer league, you've done the Raptors 905, you've done, the WNBA. There is a sense that it certainly is. I mean, obviously in Canada, it's not as big in terms of the overall industry, right? We don't have 100 networks. It's just not the same. We don't have 1 million teams. So there are so few jobs, and you said earlier you had to essentially go build a name for yourself south of the border, right? Like that's fair. Talk a little bit about that grind and like how do you feel about it? Does it make you resentful? Does it? I'm not putting words in your mouth. I'm just what are the options here? How do you feel about? How do you manage it? How do you cope with it? Because it's tough. But you're survive as Dr. Armstrong would say, you're not surviving, you're thriving. So
Thanks.
how are you navigating?
Doesn't feel like that always.
I'm sure, and which is why I asked the question, because sometimes it probably doesn't feel like it, right?
Yeah,
because you're having to do so much, and you're hitting home run after home run after home run, but yet it feels like you haven't hit a home run at times. I'm sure.
Yes, and like in our sometimes like a season, right? It's like the off season's a hard time. I'm a busybody, and I'm constantly stressing about what I'm going to do when I grow up. Like that's how I think that's like the hard part, right? It's like, I shouldn't say, I'm getting mad at myself later, but I'm 35 years old. And I just feel like, I feel like I'm so invested that I can't stop at this point, Why would, and I shouldn't, because I'm not saying like, I'm so grateful for all my jobs and opportunities. I think the grind has helped, right? I don't take any job for granted. Like I probably over prepare at times because I'm so like, it's my job. Like I'm humbled by opportunities to do this. People don't necessarily realize this, but I was serving at the casino until like 2 years ago. And the reason I had to take a summer off was because I was working so many jobs that I had to have back surgery. Like that's what happened. I was like out working because it came and haunted me eventually, right? The back that keeps on giving. But I was, I'm serving someone there like pancakes the morning after I'm calling an ESPN game, like the number one team in the country in Stanford, like the women's basketball team. Like, and I'm sitting there like laughing at myself because nobody knows, like no one gets it.
Yeah.
But that's the grind. And I have to do all those things so that I can go to summer league so that I can, I'm fortunate now where I'm not working like 3 or 4 jobs right now, but I'm also confident in that if I have to, I will, and I can. Because I've always had this like bigger picture, and I've always felt like just kind of keep going, and I think like my work ethic is something that I'm proud of, and I'm not scared. Like I'm not embarrassed to say like, yeah, like I made a lot of money at the casino and it really it allowed me to do everything, like buying the car, paying so I could drive everywhere. The other thing is like I've stayed pretty like non-committal in my life because I just like know that I might get a call to pick up and leave. That's what happened with Atlanta. Like I got the Atlanta job, and within 10 days, I was like moving down to Atlanta. I got a dog, and that's the biggest commitment in my life right now. And it's very stressful, by the way. It's reminded me why I choose to stay pretty quiet. But I mean, it's all part of the grind. And I always just, when we go talk to college students, and try to explain how competitive things are. And all I just say is like, just be ready to like work your tail off.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't, maybe you do get lined up like next week. I don't know. Like we don't have control over these things sometimes, but be ready. And I embrace the grind because I think it's what makes you better. And in television, if you're not ready for a job and you get it, it could like come back to bite you because you don't get second chances in front of a camera often. So for me, I just feel like I'm ready. I'm ready for a lot of good jobs. Like I'm ready. I've prepared myself to take on whatever role comes next.
Absolutely. And I mean, we saw you on the all women's broadcast back in March, and we'll get there in a second because there's so much going on in my mind right now I want to talk about. First of all, I totally understand the grind, the hustle. At one point, I was working 3 jobs as well as a freelancer. And it's crazy. I mean, it keeps you financially stable, having multiple sources of income, of course, but you kind of also have to. So kudos to you, because I think sometimes within the grind, it gets hard to see the bigger picture because you're just going at it every single day and you're wondering, is this even worth it? And then obviously, like, I mean, in my experience, I've had people say, oh, you're like, don't complain too much. You're lucky to just work in television, even though it's behind the scenes. You should be happy just to be here. So like, I'm completely resonating, and I hear you when you're saying like, yeah, don't lose sight of the bigger picture of what you want to do. So I love that.
Yeah. Like, as you know, you just have to be willing to adapt. It's the G League life. And I'm telling you, the G League is life. Like, it is life. You just got to be willing to show up, and whatever happens, you're going to figure out a way to make it work.
You're like, let's go. Where's the coffee?
Yeah. Look at it.
Exactly. Oh no, don't worry. I have mine right here too. Yeah. And then, so the other half of this now is, okay, let's talk about the element of being a woman in this industry, because it's still very, very relevant. And although we are seeing a lot more women in chairs, maybe more so in the States, but, you know, even with the recent drama of ESPN's Maria Taylor, Rachel Nichols, like, you know, I can't help but think, you know, I read the article, many things were wrong with that. But one of the biggest problems is the fact that we have to talk about women fighting for the same position. Why can't we pull up another chair at the table? And so when I see women like yourself now, you know, fast forward from the grind to March, there is another seat at the table. And I feel like there's a bigger conversation of equity happening in sports, but it needs to be consistent.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's always like, it's weird for me to talk sometimes about it, because I feel like I have had amazing mentorship from so many men. Like, I've never felt, and I know I'm so lucky to say but like, I've never felt like I've never sat beside a man. There are like most men are play-by-play guys that have like made me feel lesser or insignificant or dumb. Like, I've always just felt super uplifted and empowered by a lot of awesome men. So I'm not going to like sit here and say that they shouldn't have those jobs either. But you're right. It just becomes like pulling a chair up. Like, listen, do I want to get and I will tell everyone this, like, my dream is to be calling NBA basketball games. Do I want to get an NBA job because I'm a woman? No. But if that's what's pushing me over, then when I sit in that chair, I'm going to be ready to rock. Because like, it's one thing to get the chair. It's the next thing to keep it. It's the next thing to win people over. As an analyst, it's the next thing really for people to sit at home and listen and agree and learn something. That's when it becomes very real, right? I don't know if that like answers your question, but I just think for when women do get the opportunities, they've got to shine. That's that's the way that it's going to really become a more open conversation. It's not just getting the job, but then when you get it, like, you're really freaking good.
And like with like Amy, with you, like I said, like, your paperwork is immaculate when you show up to a game. So if I don't care, male, female, or other, like, I would literally sit beside you and be like, oh, okay, she's probably more prepared than me. So I don't think they'll be questioning you at all. So I'm happy to hear that you've had such a positive experience with working with men in the industry. And I don't think I mean it in an individualistic standpoint, but I think a more systematic standpoint, in the fact that, like, the decision makers who put the people in the chairs, they have towards usually a bias in the male dominated industry. So it is marvelous when you do see a woman hold space. And so that, I guess that's where I was more so referring to.
Yeah. And I think it's something too that more women are like feeling like they can do it. And that's where the pipeline starts, right? Like, there might be a woman that watched an all-women's broadcast in March that is, you know, maybe 15 years old and says, hey, maybe I want to do that. So she starts. And then when it's time, like, she's ready. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there's more women now getting involved in these types of jobs because they're seeing it as a possibility. And then maybe, like, so I don't know if that's the turnaround we see right now, but maybe in 5 to 7 years, you know, it's not so rare because it's something that more people are willing to be a part of or aspire to do.
And like, sorry, Kissy, I'm like taking this over right now, but
I'm listening intently.
I want to know, Amy, like, if you feel, because especially in an analyst role, and you're talking about, you know, the ultimate dream is to be an analyst in the NBA, like, that, it's almost like the same conversation of why we haven't seen a female head coach in the NBA. It's just something that a lot of people aren't ready for, I guess, even though we have seen it in the analyst role. I believe Doris Burke has done some herself, but like, it's just still so uncommon. So do you feel like there's an added pressure of, because you're a woman, to be that much more prepared for when the time comes, when the call comes?
Absolutely. But I also think, like, that's not something I run away from. Like, I would look at that as like an opportunity to to just continue to dive in and then maybe help someone else in the future. I mean, Becky Hammond's going to be a head coach.
Yes.
Like, she's going to be a head coach. She has to be a head coach, right? So, I mean, but when she gets that job, she's going to be under a microscope.
Yep.
You know, everything is going to be totally like probably overanalyzed, but super, like, she's done the work. So, I mean, yeah, I think as women who get to do things that not a lot of women get to do, it comes with an added pressure. But for me, like, that's something I welcome because I'm confident in the grind that I know the grind I've put in. Like they say, like the best thing to fix free throws is to just get in the gym and keep shooting them. Because when you know you've shot 500 free throws yesterday, like when you step up to the line, you know you're confident. Like, well, I know like what I've been up to. I know what I've been doing. I know how I've done it. I've done it, I believe, the right way. So if and when I get my call, like I'm ready. I'm going to be ready. I'm going to be ready. You know, and I think that that's the most important thing for women is just like putting in the work. So when they because it's going to happen. More women are going to be getting big jobs, and when it happens, it's got to be ready to go. Yeah, that's it. Easy, you know.
That's great advice. That's great life advice in general, but certainly great advice, right? Stay ready. I agree with Sav. I think that pressure is what creates that a little bit of inequity, if you will, right? Like, because obviously there are men in multiple positions. I'm not suggesting that men haven't had to work for it, but oftentimes the access is different, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's obviously, well, not often, it is different. And so, you know, you trying to get where you are might not be as easy, obviously, for name X person, right? And so that's good advice. I love your approach in terms of staying positive, more importantly, staying ready, and just keep knocking down doors and keep moving, right? So that's back to, you're in Texas now, you'll be in Summer League later. But before we move to that, I want to talk about this all women's game, this all women's broadcast, this big night that was viewed by millions that, you know, I'm sure set records somewhere. But if nothing else, was just a historic beginning, and hopefully eventually will be commonplace. But for now, we'll take it as history. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it's in some ways a bit of a blur. To give you an aha moment, when we were flying to Saskatchewan a couple of weeks ago for the CEBL, I was reading a book. Michelle O'Keefe gave me, we all know Michelle, she's awesome, Canada basketball down at Niagara College now. It's called Sideline by Julie DiCaro. It's an awesome book, and it's about just like some of the struggles that women, especially on air or in journalism and sports, have had, and oftentimes just getting thrown on the sideline instead of picking up these other jobs. And in the book, she was like, there was a line about maybe one day we'll see an all women's NBA broadcast. And I was like, whoa, because this book was just published probably 6 months ago, maybe. And it was just cool because like my window was open. I look at the clouds and it was like this cool aha moment because it's like, oh my, like I was part of that. Like for me, it was like a job. It was a job, you know? But anyways, to get to your question, the whole experience was in some ways a big blur. Like I said, I almost get more aha moments now, but it was awesome. We were coming off of the 905 season, so that was like crazy. And I'm actually kind of happy that the timing worked out that way because I didn't I didn't overthink stuff going up to it because I was really busy with the 905. And I was a studio analyst for the game. I have never sat in a studio before. So I'd say if anything, like that was the one thing that I was nervous about because I knew I was prepared, but then it's also like, how do you prepare for something that you haven't actually done? Mm-hmm. So, but I also knew like sitting beside Kate Burness and Kayla Gray right there, like I was in great hands. And then I think for me that the biggest part of that whole week was I picked up 3 radio analyst games for the Raptors. So it was actually like before the women's broadcast, I had already gotten an NBA game under my belt and like no one knew about it because it was on the radio. But for me, that was such a big moment. And doing that beside Paul Jonesy, who has been super awesome for me in my career. But yeah, the whole day was like, honestly, it was a blur. I did like every single media request that was asked of me. So like 6 a.m., like national news, like it was all like breakfast TV. I like literally went to a hotel room in Toronto and set my alarm, put on some makeup, and was just like rolling through interviews. And then when it was time to take a nap, I was like, I can't sleep. Like, I can't sleep. It was too late. So, it was so crazy. I think it was awesome that the Raptors played so good, because that made, like, as in our industry, when the team's playing good, it just, everything's better. They played awesome. I'll remember that. It was super cool. And then you just go home and you're like waiting for your phone to ring for another job, hopefully at some point. It's just our industry.
Kyle Lowry like made sure to give you guys a shout out at the end of the game, and
that was super cool.
Yeah,
that was cool. And actually, I was driving home and I didn't even know what happened until like my phone again started. Like my battery definitely drained a couple times that day. It made me feel super cool. That's never happened before, and it hasn't happened since. But it was a really cool day. But yes, Kyle gave a shout out, and it was crazy too, because it was the trade deadline. It was the last day before the trade deadline. So there was like, I think, as we always like go into those situations as presenters, like just knowing that, okay, this could happen. Like, what if Kyle doesn't, what if he's not playing today? Like, then what do we do? Like, it's, you know what I mean? And then it was actually ended up being Norm's last game as a Raptor. And so there was like also a lot of little like side things going on that really impacted the bigger picture. But I would say the most impactful part of that night for me personally was the Tangerine fan angle. There's so much going on. There was a lot of press. I was telling you, I was doing all this stuff going into it. And really, like, the other side of it is like, this is our job though. Like, we do this. Like, we're happy that it's happening. We're happy, but we just want to show up and just do our job and do it really well tonight, because it's important to us, as it is every night. But when the Tangerine fan angle came up, and they took pictures of all these like young girls at home, and I was like, that's when I was like, oh, this like is so big, because everyone's like, oh, my daughter's gonna watch, and like you appreciate it, but then when you actually see it, you're like, man, like there's so many people watching this game. So that was a really cool moment for me that night.
Across the country.
Yeah.
There's we watched that game obviously, and we being with my Gabrielle, who's 10 today, and I
happy birthday,
she didn't know.
Shout out to Gabrielle.
Yeah. Getting old. So but she doesn't she's met you, Amy, obviously, and she didn't know you were doing the game. I didn't say anything. Right. Oh. And so the game's on and she's like, that sounds like Amy. But because she wasn't really paying attention, she's doing whatever. Wait. And then loses her mind because Amy's on TV. Like, big time loses her mind. It was pretty cute. It was a pretty funny story.
I've never seen her with her hair brushed before.
Yeah. Wait a minute. She's not in track pants. What's going on?
She sounds like Amy. You even look like Amy. Awesome.
Amy coached, for those that don't know, my little one in a basketball camp that we ran in Guelph. So pretty cool stuff. Amy also coaches. Add that to your resume repertoire. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, right? Because I mean, that's actually something we haven't even talked about, Kissy, with Amy, is the fact that she was an assistant coach at Brock for a little bit there. How did that fit into the photo with everything else, Amy?
Yeah. So first of all, when I decided to be a part of that, I was so nervous that I wasn't going to like the girls. And I tell them that I like the young women. I'm like, man, like, I was like, man, these Brock girls, like, I'm used to like, like, I know I have a different twitch. So I'm like, I don't know if I can coach like these young women. If they're not like me, I don't know. Honestly, it was the best part of the whole thing. Like, I was only there 2 seasons and I like love all of them. I still talk to some of them. Like, it was the most rewarding thing about that experience was these like young women that I still have like relationships with, they're awesome. It was hard because obviously going into it, I was very open about just my career and my job. And that sometimes that meant I was going to be around the team. And that was hard because once the season starts, like, you're invested and you want to be there. But like, I told myself that I can't give up games and I can't give up TV games, right? Yeah. Like, that's the bigger picture for me. And everyone was super supportive of that. So I was lucky. It was the only way it could work, right? Even the players were super supportive of that. But it made me feel like crap. It really did. It made me feel like crap. And there was definitely a couple games like at Buffalo in the winter where I like probably unsafely driving through snowstorms to get to like our tip or 6 p.m. just like running in at the national anthem. I loved it because I was in the gym all the time. Like literally, I felt like I was living in gyms. I loved that. But I mean, just in terms of commitment. But it is something I do miss with the broadcast is that, as a coach or as a staff, as a team, if you have a big win, like I close my notes and I leave. If you have a bad loss, I close my notes and I leave. Like there's something about obviously celebrating victories with teams that is like the best if you've been in those locker rooms before. But then also there's something I love about, things not going well and then waking up at 5 or 6 a.m. and getting past it and working your tail off. Like I love that. That's just part of who I am. Like as much as obviously I don't want to lose games, it's like this like concept of redemption, like the next day that you can do that. And I miss that. I do miss that. I know Charles is laughing because the grass is always greener on the other side. Like I know no one really likes that, but at the same time, like it's part of like sport and it's part of team that I do miss with broadcast. Because at the end of the day, like I fold my little notes up and I go home, like regardless of if it's a big win or if it's a bad loss. And that's the one thing that I think that job really helped me with like I got to be a part of that again, and I do miss that.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Would coaching ever fit back in the photo again, or you think it's just it's maybe?
I don't know. I don't know.
She is going to be big dreams. 5 years. Where is Amy?
Oh, in my dreams would be working for an NBA.
Working not in your dreams. Where are you in 5 years? You're making it happen. We all know that.
Just called 82 plus games, and I don't know. My dream would have been I want to work an NBA season, and then I want to rent a house in the Florida Keys for like a month in the summer. Have like anyone that wants to come down. That's like my kind of like big plan.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I don't have any more questions, but I mean, at the same time, I could also just talk to you about whatever for the entire day. So, I mean, unless I know you probably have somewhere to run off to.
Oh, you know me. Just say,
just chilling.
I just have one last question, Amy. If you were not doing this, what would it be?
Yeah, that's
TV like broadcasting. What would it be? What's passion number 2?
Yeah, and you know what? I will say this: it's something that's COVID's like really made you like kind of think about, right? Because like for everyone, it's had to figure something out. I really, and I'm not kidding. I think if I was not involved in like broadcast or television or even sport, I'd be a police officer. Like my dad's a retired police officer. We need better police officers, right? Like we can all agree on that. And I know, like, I do believe I would be when I actually want to be a detective. Like that's it. It's kind of, I understand you got to be police, right? That's how it works, right? You got to be a police before you can be a detective. And I actually looked at some programs.
Hey, as an avid murder mystery watcher myself.
So I'm not gonna lie, Sav, like that's where I started thinking about like, man, I think I would really like this. So it's totally like naive and ignorant to say, because I'm hoping there's a detective out there listening who's completely flabbergasted by me saying, oh, I want to do that. Right. Because it's so much more to that industry, but yeah, like that would be,
I think as a former police officer, people would say they'd be happy to hear someone wants to do that job, right?
Yeah,
I think they too have had a rough year. Like let's not get that twisted. It's been rough. So to hear that anyone wants to do that would probably put a smile on somebody's face.
Absolutely.
There's still some good ones out there.
Yes.
Not to mention, you'd be the best. You'd be the best detective cop as like ever too, because you'd be like tall and strong, and then you're like,
yeah, maybe I don't know.
I see it.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast, Amy. Don't want to take up any more of your time, but we really appreciate listening to your story.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Like I said, it's always the 905 family is very special to my heart, near and dear, hoping that we stay a family for a little bit longer.
Yes.
But yeah, we'll see.
Absolutely.
Have fun out in Summer League.